Football is my sport, so I was a professional footballer, soccer player, and yeah, and we'll get into, I guess, my transition and all the rest of it later.
I'm Nicole Howe. I was saying to Shannon, I was actually born in Malaysia, moved out here when I was about 10, grew up out in Balkan Hills, knows the area. Basketball was my sport, so I played professionally both here in Oz and over in Europe, and my mum's actually English. I was fortunate enough to represent Great Britain as well.
My name's Diana Kyriazopoulos. I was born and raised in Sydney. I have a Greek background. I represented Australia in Taekwondo, so I was in the national team for about 10 years and fought in multiple events across the world.
The transition for athletes, it doesn't end when you quit sport. Like, it's a process, and for some people it can last years.
Every athlete will go through an identity crisis. That is okay. It's just the way in which you navigate through it that is important.
There are so many different things that you may struggle with, you know, from an athlete's point of view. Like, it could be identity, so it could be very internal, psychological things, but it could be career focus, it could be social networks that you've lost contact with. So many different areas that you could struggle with at different times. So I think there needs to be a conversation around understanding it's a process for athletes and what kind of support we're going to give them after their sport is well and truly over.
So even though I decided not to continue with the sport and I needed to disconnect, I could still go to all the training sessions, I was still keeping fit and active. I always had somebody to lean on just to bounce these ideas off. And I'd say that's the extent of the support that I was open to at the time. But there are structures there to support people if they're open to them. Yeah.
So from a football perspective, so we have the PFA, that's Professional Footballers Australia, that's our Players Association. So obviously there's footballers on the board, like so active football players on the board, and so every action they do, every decision they're involved with is about best interest for the players, you know, from a well-being, welfare, transition perspective.
So for me, it was my last season here in the WNBL, and I wasn't a player that was getting a lot of court time. I was definitely a fringe player, definitely like a bench player. But I still felt like that was an important role. I still trained just as hard as anybody else. But I did feel like quite overlooked, and there wasn't any discussion around, well, you know, Nick, this is kind of the path we see you taking, this is what it's going to take to kind of get to here. It wasn't any of that. Like, I felt like I was definitely in the shadows a little bit. So I had a moment where I was like, well, I could keep doing this for a couple of years and see what happens, or I can just call it quits and go explore something else in my life and see if there's anything else that I could be good at. So I made quite a split decision at the end of my last season to be like, I'm done with it. And it was tough because like the Great Britain team would still have me, but I sort of stopped playing, and if I stopped playing, it just meant it wasn't going to be possible, so I had to kind of give it all up. And I did, and I was working, after that transition, I was working full-time in a marketing agency and absolutely hated it. Like, that transition from playing sport to just being at a desk 9 to 5 was so difficult.
Not for a second do I expect them to play a part in sort of what happens next, just like I'm not playing a part in what's happening next for them. But a lot of players like really, you know, I've heard a number of my friends saying, you give so much of yourself to the club, and you commit so much of you risk your body and your mental well-being for the greater cause of the team, and then you've forgotten about it. And I guess the shame of it is I never questioned it since this conversation. I just thought it's just how it is, right? And I never even thought there was perhaps a different way.
You do have to take the time to kind of grieve that loss, understand, gain better perspective, and you can help, you know, if you're in a position that's supporting an athlete, help them gain that perspective, because I think if you hold on to that and carry that sense of failure through to whatever you're doing next, it's kind of setting you up to struggle a little bit more. Like, you want to have self-confidence, you want to feel good about what you have achieved, gain good perspective on it, take what you can, like Diana was saying, all the transferable skills, help them understand how you actually use those transferable skills, because just having them isn't really enough. Like, you've got to understand how that applies to the next thing. So helping them move through that process and navigate it, I think.
What we essentially do, right, we partner with companies that value the mentality and the skill set that athletes can bring to a company's culture. Some of the best athletes, the best candidates, are semi-professional athletes because they have accepted that they need a dual career. Right? The other thing I would say to anyone, so I say this to kids that I coach and mentor. Professional sport doesn't make you happy. Right? It's not like you pursue sport so that one day you're going to get to be a professional so you can be happy. right? You pursue sport for the feeling that it gives you, the daily, like showing up to training every day because you're just obsessed with it, right? And you can do that regardless of the level you're playing at, if that's what you're passionate about. So someone playing, you know, in the NPL, right? For those who don't know, NPL is like a semi-professional league, good quality players, but they also need another career. They can get plenty of fulfillment in that playing career if that's what they want out of their sport, and attempt to be their best and push themselves all the time and still get the same satisfaction and spend time dedicated to becoming an expert at something else. And like I said, some of our best success stories are semi-professional athletes that have pursued that business path as well.
I think for me, if I was to answer that question, to be honest with you, my advice would be just do what you enjoy. You don't have to do something, you don't have to be 100% in or 100% out. I think that's a real constraint, and it's a real crazy mindset. I think you just need to do what you enjoy. You can still play, you can still coach, and you can still have fun and enjoy, but you can still put your energy elsewhere and be great at something else. And it's what I've done, to be honest with you. Like, I have left my sport, I'm a coach now, I give my time there and I see great results. I give my time to my job and I see great results, but I also train and I have fun, and I know I'm not going to compete at that level again, but I still love the sport and I still love kicking and I love moving around, and I'll do it until the point where I don't want to do it anymore, and that's okay. So my advice would be just to enjoy and focus your energies elsewhere, because there is so much value that you can give. You don't know it until you do it and see it, and then you start to realise, wow, I actually have so many skills that average people don't have. And it's just come naturally from being an athlete and from all of the years of commitment and dedication that I've given.